Let's talk about bass chords. They're fun. We like playing them. We like how they sound. But it's like kind of annoying to figure out how you're supposed to learn them. Like there's all these books of bass chords that just have like diagram after diagram after diagram after diagram. And like, what are you supposed to do? Memorize 200 different chord shapes? That's just not really practical. So in this video, I'm gonna attempt to explain to you how I actually think about bass chords and to give you an idea of how you can take the ones you do know and expand them outwards and get a lot more things that you can do with them, and it'll sound cool. First things first, you're gonna need to be able to navigate a 2-octave range of a given scale to be able to follow this video. So if we're talking about variations on an A major chord or something, you're gonna need to be able to get around that range without freaking out. So if you need help with that, I have an ebook called Electric Bass Scales and Arpeggios. I go through my system for fingering 2-octave scales. And if you're way on the beginning end of things, I have a really good beginner bass chords video on the Bass Buzz channel. This is not for beginners. This is for intermediate, advanced people who know some chord shapes, but you're trying to get a little more special sauce out of them without just memorizing some big boring book of chord shapes. There's two broad concepts I want to cover in this video. The first thing, I'm just going to talk about some common chord shapes that people learn and how you can leverage those a lot more than you think you can. And then I want to get into taking chord shapes and doing voice leading and finding melodies within the chord shapes and stuff. But we're going to start with the easier thing. So one thing I find that people tend to know when they started learning bass chords is they know this big mofo of a bass chord where you play a root, a fifth, an octave, and a 10th, either a major or a minor. Or you might be doing like a 7th chord variation where you replace the octave with the 7th. So you could have like a major 7 chord or a minor 7 chord, or even a minor major 7 chord, or a dominant 7 chord. So I just want to look at that basic structure. We have a root, a fifth, either a 7th or an octave, and then a 10th, which is the 3rd in the next octave up. So one thing I find with this is that people learn it either like this with 4 notes, or they learn it maybe without the 5th, just root, octave, 10th, or without the octave, just root, 5th, 10th. And what I want to hip you to is that though all those variations are basically the same chord in terms of approaching the neck and figuring out what shape you're doing. So even in my beginning bass chords video over on the Bass Buzz channel, where I'm teaching you how to play major and minor 10ths, it's the same thing. We're just taking the 5th and the octave out of the middle. So if you just think from this 4-string framework, and this is all going to be biased towards 4-string bass playing because that's where my heart is. So if you have a 5-string, then you can do a million more things than I can. I don't actually like to play a full 4-note chord that often because it sounds nice on its own, but it takes up a lot of space. And if you're actually trying to play bass chords in a band or even just like in a duo thing with a guitar player or sax, whatever, it fills up a lot of space, which means mud. And we don't like mud in our chords. We like nice, clean chords. So often what I'll do is I might be thinking about this as a realm of possibility for a chord, but then I'll actually subtract the 5th if I want to thin it out on the bottom, or I'll take out the octave if I want a little more richness from the 5th, but I still don't want the full mud of having the octave in there. Or I'll take both of the middle notes out and just play 10ths, which is the thing that's most likely to work in a fuller band context because there's all this hollow space where a snare drum or a low guitar part or something could actually breathe. And same kind of thing looking at the 7th chord context. You know, if I play 1, 5, 7, 10, that's pretty dense. Like I'm plucking by the bridge pickup to try to thin it out so it's less muddy, but if I play it here, that's kind of a puddle of mud. So if I know in my little theory brain that the 5th isn't super important to making the sound of a minor 7, major 7, or a dominant 7 because it's just a perfect 5th, then if I take that 5th out, then I get a much cleaner sound, and that gives me what you and other people might think of as a different chord shape, which is 1, 7, 10 for a dominant 7, or for minor 7, or for major 7. But it's actually this same framework of 1, 5, 7, 10. We're just taking out the 5th. So what I hope I'm getting across through this little example is you might be able to get more sounds out of a chord shape that you already know just by ditching a note. We could probably apply the same concept just a little less interestingly to like a 3-note chord voicing. Like let's stay in A, I'll play like a a little A major 7 voicing where I have 1, 5, 7. This is technically an incomplete chord because there's no third, but let's just say I wanted an even thinner thing. I could pull out that middle note and just play a root and a 7th, which technically is not a chord, it's an interval because it only has 2 notes. I don't buy that. It sounds like a chord to me. Same thing if you're playing like 1, 3, 7, you can ditch the 7 or ditch the 3, and that's going to take some color out of your chord if you're taking one of the tones that's important to the sound of the chord. But I just want to get you thinking about your chords more in terms of independent voices that you're stacking on top of each other, because that's what we're going to talk about right now. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm wearing a shirt with a big beard on it, this is a Lee Sklar shirt. I got it from his website. If you don't know who Lee Sklar is, then you really should, because he's one of the most recorded bass players of all time. He has his own YouTube channel with a bunch of awesome videos where he's like playing these classic bass lines that he played on the original records. And I also did a video and talked about him a bit on the Bass Buzz channel about the producer switch. Anyway, so just a plug for Lee Sklar. He's awesome. I want to be that cool when I grow up. Okay, let's get into the juicy stuff of this video. I wanted to start with some preliminaries so I don't scare you away at the beginning, but now I'm going to scare you. So, and again, I'm going to assume you know a few chord shapes, and if you don't, I'll just try to explain them on the fly. Let's say that, that I'm playing another common chord voicing. Let's do a G major 7, so I'll play a G on the E string on the 15th fret, play an F sharp on the D string, and a B on the E string, so I'm playing root, 7th, 10th, which you might recognize. It's the same thing we were just talking about, 1, 5, 7, 10, we're just taking out the 5. Okay, so here's the cool thing is rather than thinking of this as like a shape and it's one thing, there's actually 3 things happening, right? A root, a 7th, and a 10th. And all of those voices can move in either direction. So if you think about it more like 3 singers or whatever analogy works for you, any of those people in our chord could move their note up or move their note down, and that'll make a really different sounding thing happen. So even if I don't think about music theory or analysis or whatever, and I just move the notes, I can get a bunch of interesting sounds to happen. So let's take that, that major 3rd on top, the major 10th, and I'll just try moving it around with whatever finger I can figure out to do it with. And there's a technical aspect to this that I'll talk about more in a bit. I could take it down a half step, and now I know in my head that makes it a minor major 7 chord, but we could also just think about the sound and the voices moving for now, and like, ooh, that's weird. And let's maybe move it down again. So now it's on the 9th. It's on the sharp 11, up to the 5th. So there's a bunch of stuff I can do on that note. I could move the 7th around. I can move it up to the octave, and then it just sounds like a triad. There's the flat 7. So I can get a lot of movement with that inner voice, and I can move the bass note too, which is going to have more of an effect of changing the chord, the note name of the chord, because it'll probably make the root note sound like it's moving. That's edgy. That's pretty interesting, because I just turned, if I put on my analysis cap, I just turned a G major 7 into an A flat minor 7, or a G sharp minor 7, I guess, if you don't want to be in the key of C flat major, just by moving that one note. And then I can move it again. So that's like all the possibilities. It doesn't sound all that good because I'm not being musical, but what if I tried to make it sound more music-y? I could just move the inner voice a little bit. And now I'm actually creating a whole kind of chord progression with some interesting voice movement, just with my one chord shape. An even simpler way to go about this is to limit yourself to your diatonic options that are within the scale. So if I'm thinking, let's think G major for this, so natural 4. We could also think G Lydian on a major 7 chord, but let's think Ionian major. So as I'm playing this chord, I want to be able to see where all my G major notes are in that area. Down here I got da, 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 da. Kind of get up in that range. So if I know where all those notes are, which is kind of a prerequisite for doing this, And again, I have an ebook that'll help you with that. I can try moving all my voices up a scale tone or down a scale tone and see what that sounds like. So if I move my top voice up to the 4 from the 3, then down to 2, back to 3, then I can move 7 up to 8 to the octave, back down to 7 to 6, and I can move the root to 7 to 2. And some cool stuff starts to happen, even though I didn't like learn any new chord shapes. So if you're holding your bass and you're trying this out with me for the first time, you may have noticed that it's really hard to figure out like what the hell finger to do the next thing with. And the reason I'm just doing it on the fly is because I'm not really doing it on the fly. I've done this so many times. So it might look like, wow, I'm just moving around so spontaneously, but I've tested all these possibilities. And so that's just kind of what you need to do to get comfortable yourself, is think, okay, if I want this B to go up to a C, which is the next note on the scale, what could I do? This finger is not going to do me any good. These two are occupied, so let's move the pinky up. And then if I want to grab the 9th to move the 10th down to the 9th, what could I do? These two are busy because they're still playing these notes. The pinky can't get down there. Let's see, is that... Okay, it's technically possible, but I would never do that. I've never done this before. I'm never going to do it again. So anyway, so the index finger is the obvious win, right? Rather than inventing something I've never done before. So we just swap the pinky for the index. So that's my plan there. And then I got to do the same thing for the inner note. I could do that. That's kind of clunky. I might do a big switch. There's often multiple options to finger a chord, and it really depends on where that chord is going next in the progression. Like if I play this chord this way with the pinky here and the ring here, and the index on the root note, then I have the middle finger mobile to help maybe the ring finger. If I put the middle finger on the root note, then I have the index mobile to maybe support the, to grab these 14th fret notes to support either the high note or the inner voice. So you have to make decisions like that a lot with chord voicing, and it's nice to be good at like more than one fingering. And honestly, it just takes repetition. Like think about when you first started fretting on the bass, and just like going like this and then going like this was a big deal. You're basically making yourself do something that's like 3 to 4 times more complicated than that, because all of your fingers are having to figure out a position and interact with each other and like get the right amount of arch to not mute a string. So just be patient, but I hope that you'll get over that hump so that you start having fun with these chords and moving the voices around. So the benefit of doing all this work, besides that you can make interesting little progressions from one starting chord shape, is also that you can start building melodies into your chord playing and doing the kind of thing that guitar players call chord melody playing, where there's like a melody on top and a bass note on the bottom and then some inner voices filling in. You can sort of get that sound on the bass if you do some voice leading between your chords, and then also you're able to move your voices around the way that a melody would. So what I want you to do, let's try to make this a little less ephemeral and nail it down to one thing you can do. I want you to take one chord shape that you feel comfortable with. Preferably, even a 2-note chord would work. I would say a 2 or a 3-note chord. This voice leading thing doesn't work that great with the full 4-note chord because you don't have any fingers that are free. So you have to do more complicated maneuvers to be able to move notes around. So a 2 or a 3-note chord, even just a power chord, and just see how you can move each note around within your stretching ability. And then top voice. Yes, I have big hands. You don't have to go this far. And most importantly, you find the Batman theme. And you want to do that to see what it sounds like, and also to train your fingers to just like figure out what to do in that scenario. And then maybe you do it with a couple 2-note chords. You could do it with just starting with a third too. And you can do it chromatically or using the scale. And then try it with some 3-note voicing. I love love doing this with like a 1-3-7 voicing on a major 7. You can do like a hammer on from the 6th up to the 7th using your index finger. It makes it sound like way more flavory. So that's a whole world of like using these neighbor tones just to get articulations that I'm not going to get into in detail. But that's really cool too. So that's assignment 1, is take a chord voicing you know and just try to move each voice up and down either in the scale or chromatically, and just enjoy the technical challenge and also enjoy what sounds you get. I used to write little solo bass pieces for myself just by moving chords around like this. I don't know if they were any good, but at the time it was really interesting to me. The other thing you should do is just listen for this in bass players who are playing chords, and also guitar players. Like James Taylor does a lot of cool stuff like this. He'll just grab like an open position chord, but then move one of the notes around up and down on the scale, so it adds a little melody to the guitar part. And piano players do this too. Like when I was playing this, I'm thinking about Robert Glasper. His version of Afro Blue, there's a lot of that sound off of like a major 7 voicing with a little hammer on, the 6 going up to the 7. So it just adds a lot more flavor than just going blah. You can really have your chord feel like it's moving around somewhere. Thank you for watching me ramble about bass chords for however many minutes this was. I know there's a lot of interesting, distracting things that YouTube is showing you right now, and you chose to watch this video all the way to this part. So thank you for that. And please support me on Patreon if you're interested in seeing more bass lessons on this channel. My patrons will be getting a little bonus video to go with this video about how you can do some easy analysis to get your voices to lead a little bit better if you need help with the theory of that. And you can check out my ebooks if you need help with your 2-octave scales and arpeggios, and also chord and scale relationships. There's some reference materials in there too. I think those are all my plugs. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.